Hello all, and heading home from work now. It's a pretty fine day here in Dublin, though a bit cloudy as you can see behind me. So in this video I want to go back to another topic of mine that I've been doing a few videos on recently, and that is Brexit. So I did a few videos on the rundown of Brexit from the Irish perspective. So in this one, which is going to be one of my last on the topic, unless something major takes place in the next while, which is unlikely, I wanted to talk about how I see personally, as an Irishman looking in at the UK political system, economic system, what I see needs to happen in order for Brexit to be either reversed or to be made a success of. So let's work into this video. I'm going to focus on the reversal of Brexit, for Britain to re-enter the EU, and I intend to do one at a later stage on how I feel Britain should purport itself in order to make some sort of a success out of Brexit, from particularly a outsider's perspective on things. First off, I'm not a big Brexit fan. I didn't believe it was a good idea for the UK to leave the EU. I understand, or I try to understand, the reasons that they give. They seem a little bit odd to me, but as a citizen of a country that left a larger political body in the past, under circumstances that outsiders might say were not advantageous to the country, to my country, I can understand the emotional content with regards to seeking your own path and going your own way. However, I would personally prefer if Brexit was reversed. This is largely because I have friends and family in the UK. Their situation isn't very good at the moment, and I feel that it has put barriers between our culture and British culture, which we're only just about getting back on track these days after a long and very fractious history. So what needs to be done in order to get Britain back into Europe? Well, from the British side, first off, and this is going to sound controversial, but they need to have a reform government. As bad and all as that would be for Ireland, and I have made a video on that, and as nasty as I feel reform actually are, the only way to discredit reform and to show it up for the farce that it is to allow reform to get control of the British Parliament and see them basically fall in upon themselves. This would be very, very bad, I think, for British economy. I think it would be very bad for Britain's political system, very bad for British culture. But at the moment, they can make any sort of claim, make any sort of promise, and there's no way to test to see whether or not they will actually improve things. Now, just like MAGA in the United States, you're not going to sway really true believers in reform in Nigel Farage away from that mode of thinking. But there's a lot of people who are very unhappy at the moment with 14 years of Conservative government, and there's a lot of people also unhappy with the current Labour government. However, they are not necessarily big reform voters, so they need to be shown that reform is actually a very, very bad option. And talking about it hypothetically is not going to work. So that's the first. The second is that the political system in the UK, the voting system, needs to be renovated. In Ireland we use proportional representation, which means that we have got a large amount of smaller parties, and we don't have any one party governments. At least we haven't had one in an awful long time. So the case in Britain is that the first past the post system has ended up in a two-party race, really, between Conservatives and Labour. And it takes a huge disruption, such as Brexit has been, for that to change. So I think that British democracy could really do with more of a variation of different parties in power, whether they be very far left, very far right, mid-ground, whatever. And that coalitions should become the norm in British politics to allow as many people get a chance at being represented at the higher levels of the British establishment as possible. Not to say that has worked very well here, because our cultures are different enough that things are not really comparable, but it would make, I think, for a healthier situation. And if that means that the governments are a little bit less stable, then so be it. If a government is putting itself into the position where a junior partner walks out, then they're obviously doing something that that might not be necessarily wise. So that's number 2. Number 3 is that, just as the European Union has said, there needs to be broad consensus within the British public in order for Brexit to take place. So we haven't seen many protests, many marches, pro-Brexit marches recently. There's going to be one coming up fairly soon. But in the current situation, it's looking as an outsider's point of view that Brexit is either being ignored or being pushed aside as a traumatic experience and not really being wanted to be tackled with by the people of Britain. The argument that 52% of the population voted for Brexit, and so therefore 10 years later everybody should be still reasonably happy with it, is fairly ridiculous now at this point. We have seen the economic strain Brexit has put on Britain, and yes, you can blame the Ukraine war, you can blame the pandemic, but it's becoming clearer and clearer as years go by that this is less and less of a wonderful bonanza and more of a flat pancake, really. So there needs to be more push by the general British population towards Brexit, more protests, more vocal responses, more people coming out and talking about it. It needs to come back into the public discourse, is what I'm saying. And let the Brexiteers moan and groan and roll their eyes and talk about the 52%, etc., etc. At the end of the day, after 10 years, this is like 2 parliamentary votes later, more than 2 parliamentary votes later. The British people have the right to change their mind if they should want to, and they need to be more vocal about that. On the European side, Europe needs to basically understand that Brexit was as much of a con on the British people as it was on the rest of European society. Holding grudges against the UK is not going to work. And not that I'm saying that European states do, but trying to impose a situation where the British feel that they are being deliberately excluded from Europe is not going to be helpful. Yes, go through the standard process. Yes, go through the normal steps And yes, don't expect there to be any special carve-outs for different things because you left and then wanted to come back again. But rolling your eyes and saying that the British deserve everything that they got, that's not a good solution either. And it needs to be seriously thought about with regards to those in power in Brussels. With Ukraine and Moldova now starting their process to enter the European Union, and with a lot of talk about how this would be beneficial to both countries, I like to think that within the next 5, 10, 15 years, Britain will actually come back into the fold again. It's looking more and more likely as the population of those who voted against Brexit is dwindling, and the population of those who support rejoining the European Union is growing year by year. But we'll have to just see how things go. At the end of the day, these are the situations I think need to happen before Brexit can really be thought about for rejoining. So to recap, a reform government to discredit reform and show them for the charlatans that they are. Renovation of the voting system to allow for more representation in the parliament rather than just two parties sharing power and knocking it between the two of them like a tennis ball. More of a push within the British population who are pro-Brexit. More protests, more people out on the street, more people making their voices heard. And finally, a change in attitude within Europe to make the idea of Britain returning to the European Union more plausible and more appealable to both sides. Well, that's how I feel it could go. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens next. Take care.